Video we went through 5 keyboard shortcuts where I explained different types of shortcuts that you can use on your hand and basically make your workflow much faster. And this basically requires you to not even lift your hand up from the keyboard. However, you do need to have certain clips selected and whatnot. So apart from that, you basically need to just keep your hands on the keyboard and just do the shortcuts, and you basically are achieving a lot of the things. You don't need to go into the effects to bring in dissolves and fades and whatnot. So you can basically do a lot of transitions, a lot of some basic stuff just right off the keyboard, and you don't need to do anything else. So it really works out great for me. So in this video, I just want to go over a couple things around the sequence and the windows that we see that we don't actually use a lot of the times, because we are just so constrained to using it in our simplest way, and we don't actually learn some tricks that are up in the Premiere Pro sleeve. So just to go over a couple, so first of all, we have this thing called lock. So this basically can lock a layer, and everything in that layer becomes locked. It does not become invisible. However, if you do want to keep it invisible, there's an eye icon. If you click that, it basically hides that whole layer, and even though it's there, it's not seen, and it's basically like a mute button. So bringing down, so coming down to the audio panels, you do have an amp button that if you do press it, it basically mutes the whole layer. I use this a lot when I'm editing different types of videos where I have, so even for something like this, I have an audio coming from this little mic here, and then I also have audio coming from the camera. Once the whole thing is synced up, I don't have any use for the camera audio because everything is synced up, and I'm going to be using this microphone. I'm muting one layer. I'm basically able to hear with the other layer, but if it was the other way around, as you can hear now, this is picking up both. So once I do hit the mute button, it's going to mute the camera now, and we're only going to be listening in to the microphone in front of me. So this works for visuals, and this works for audio as well. You have an I button for your visuals, and then you have an M button for your audio to be muted. So this works out really nice. I think this can make your workflow much faster. Another thing we have here is a lock button. As I said, this works for either audio or video. So this really works out great. And going back to the last video where I did mention Q and W, where you can ins and outs, and you can basically trim the clips however you like. And I did mention that I at this point I only like to have specific clips in only one layer, because if you do press Q and W, it basically trims down the whole segment of the thing. So what usually happens if I press Q and W would be all of the clips from the top and the bottom would be pressed up against each other, and they'll usually create like a marker in between, and they'll create different clips. For this specific reason, you could just lock this layer so nothing gets affected to those layers. However, if you are trimming ins and outs, sometimes things do get messed up and they're not lined up as well. So if you have audio that's synced up, I would never put that in the locked layers, because at this point, if you're doing ins and outs, a lot of the audio will also get messed up, and it will stay where it is. Meanwhile, the video and the primary audio will be moved. So if you have something synced up and you don't want it to be messed up, so don't use the locks there. Otherwise, lock works really well if you want to just lock something up there and do your regular editing. So that's number 2. And then number 3, I really like to use the B, as I talked about in the last video. You can basically bring things in and out without changing too much. You can press A to bring the footage that's trailing behind this point and bring it in and stuff. So that works out really well as well. So another thing you can use in your sequence is ins and outs. As I said, you can use this in your sequence monitor to select what ins and outs of a clip you want, like what segment of the clip you want to be displayed in your actual project sequence. So in sequence, if you do ins and outs, you can basically select what part of the project you want to be exported. So if you press in, I, and out on a specific thing, and then you go into file and then you export your footage there, you can basically select a setting where you're selecting ins and outs. So basically, you know, only exports a specific in and out instead of, you know, doing the whole sequence or having too much in there. So I usually use in and out for exporting my footage because I can tell it to end, you know, 2 seconds after the video goes dark. So this works out really well as well. So another thing that I did not actually know for the longest time is instead of, you know, dragging everything back by mouse, click there. It just makes, it's black space, but once you click it, it becomes white. So this basically is like a placeholder. And to get rid of this, all you need to do is press delete. And this basically, you know, clips on everything from the end to back to, you know, the last clip. So this is really nice because you don't actually need to drag the clips with your mouse and try to line them up, make sure you don't go over the top. This works out really nice because, you know, you just have a click, delete, and everything kind of just sticks together. And as I said, not having a magnetic timeline like FCP, this really works out nice, and it can basically be really helpful at times. So this will be the last point here. Another thing I really like is when, you know, you have different camera footages. Sometimes I will have a drone footage, which I don't like to compress. So my drone footage will usually be at 4K, or my DJI Osmo Action would be at 2.7K. So a lot of the times we have different, you know, sizes for the videos as well. So what I like to do at that point is, you know, simply just right click on the clip, and then you can basically set it to frame size. This basically will fill up the whole frame without you having to manually go in. So if you just select all and do this, it will mostly work for you, because even if you have a 1080 file on 1080 project, it will also fill up the space just as much. It basically scales it to 100, while 4K would be scaled to a 50, 2.7K will be scaled to like a 70 or something. So it usually works out really nice, and this is one of the ways that you can, you know, cut down on changing every single element's setting. Another thing I do like to do is, obviously talking about settings, if you do want to copy and paste settings, you can just press Command C for copying. You basically do Command C on a clip, and then all you got to do is press Option Command V on the other clips, and it pops up like a whole little window, and then which basically allows you to select which settings you want to be pasted onto this next clip, or how many ever clips you wanted. So these are a couple of ways, ins and outs of Premiere Pro sequences when you are editing. If you can just use this, obviously the keyboard shortcuts are really amazing. You can do amazing things with them within, like, you know, milliseconds. But in this case, you are using your mouse, but you are using the tools that are provided with Premiere Pro. A lot of the beginners don't actually know these tricks because, you know, we're afraid to mess up something inside of our, you know, inside of our sequences. So just to avoid that, we never actually mess around or to, you know, demolish our work. But that's something that we always need to remember, is if you do have the autosave on, everything will be saved accordingly. You basically have an autosave of your last file, even though you think that you don't. At times when your computer freezes or something happens, you actually do have that footage there. So don't worry, chill out, you got it under control, and just don't forget to, you know, try out new things, learn new things. So yeah, that's it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.